the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God. Ralph Waldo Emerson. Across the globe, nature has this sacredness that attracts people to it. Mountaintops and striking natural formations are holy sites, from the prayer flags atop Mount Everest to Uluru's role as an axis mundi, to places like Mount Sinai being a location of direct communication with the divine. People have built cultures around the significance of natural areas, and I think it stems from the meditative experience Emerson is describing. As part of the transcendental movement, Emerson was a big proponent of moving out of cities in order to find the truth and essence of things. This journey to the woods was one of spirit, and this is the backing of 2018's Celeste and Iconoclasts as they each explore faith in different ways. Both of these games are, on the surface, phenomenal platformers with a high-bit pixelated style. Celeste follows the journey of Madeline, a determined hiker hell-bent on climbing Mount Celeste to find truth and help fix the problems in her life. Iconoclasts also has a strong female protagonist in Robin, a mechanic determined to help as many people as she can, despite the overbearing control of the one concerned. These games are closely similar, not only in aesthetics, but in themes. What is interesting is how each of them explores the nature of faith in different ways. Maybe that's what it is about them that drove me to come out here. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking for something. Anyway, let's start with Celeste. The climb up Mount Celeste isn't easy. One look at my death count on each level will tell you that much, but the game's themes complement its difficulty. See, Madeline's journey up Mount Celeste is not just a difficult platforming challenge, it's an allegory for the personal obstacles of anxiety and depression Madeline is encountering. The climbing of a mountain should make this pretty obvious, and while that message strikes at the heart of Celeste, it isn't what struck me about the game. What is more interesting to me is how the game uses this difficulty as a way of establishing a theme of faith. I do not use faith here in the overtly religious sense. Let's save that for Iconoclasts. For Celeste, I mean faith in a similar way to Spanish essayist Miguel de Unamuno, who wrote, quote, "Faith is the consciousness of life and in our spirit," going on to say, "Faith seeks the impossible, the absolute, the infinite, and the eternal fullness of life," end quote. In other words, faith, for our purposes, is an awareness of life, and an awareness of the soul. It is a striving towards seemingly impossible heights and beliefs to attain some kind of permanent and real happiness. If you've played it, you may be already seeing how Celeste fits into this definition. While both Madeline herself, as well as the player, do not know exactly why they continue to climb the mountain at first, Madeline has a determination that is established in the very first level, when her friend Theo says he can see the determination in her eyes. This determination is passed on to the player in three major ways. The first is the very map/menu screen. It, being a low poly render of the mountain, gives the player a visible guide of how far they've come, making the summit seem close after only a few levels. Furthermore, the second is with autosave and respawn. Whenever the player fails, they are instantly put back at the beginning of the screen with no lives, delays, or game overs. This allows attempts to be repeated with succession, and keeps the player determined on how to get to the next screen, taking the game in steps rather than as a whole. Thirdly, determination is built by the game literally encouraging Madeline, and thus the player. Not only do characters tell Madeline she can climb the mountain, and not only does Madeline tell herself she can climb the mountain, but the very first moments of the game tell you not to be nervous and that you can do the climb. Madeline's determination allows her to seek this seemingly impossible feat, to strive to the highest peaks of the most insanely dangerous and mysterious mountain ever. This seeking of the impossible is a form of faith, and her journey a form of pilgrimage. Madeline's true goals are elucidated as her journey continues. Mount Celeste has supernatural qualities that are unfolded as the game runs. The old lady living on the mountain says it brings out your true self. For Madeline, this gives her a doppelganger. Her doppelganger is the part of her that is depressed, scared, and pessimistic. Through dialogue and chase scenes, it actively serves as an antagonist, but one that feels possible to overcome. This part of her needs to be understood and reasoned with in order for Madeline to continue. Of course, this plays into Celeste being an allegory for overcoming depression. However, through the simple act of discovering her true self in a physical way, it also becomes a part of the self-discovery aspect of faith. Faith requires you, either through religion or spirituality of any kind, to really look into yourself, understand yourself, and be happy with yourself, as you are. She becomes aware of herself, all of herself, and that means being aware of her spirit. This spiritual awareness fits right into the story of Celeste. By overcoming depression, Madeline must realize faith and her spirit. However, games as an interactive medium required that theme in some way to reflect onto the player. I'm not going to exaggerate and say that playing Celeste will connect you with your true spirit. This isn't game theory. But what I will say is that Celeste's difficulty in relation to collectible strawberries creates an awareness of the player's own ability. These collectibles are entirely unnecessary for completing the game, and the loading screen even tells you that. However, they serve as an extra challenge for more advanced players. Some of the strawberries seem like doable challenges. Some of them may be too difficult or frustrating, and so it's best to just skip those. This gives the player a gauge for their own skill level, and if the player chooses to replay the level because, for example, they need footage for a video essay, strawberries you were unable to collect last time seem more doable the second time, because the player's own skill has increased. So, the game is allowing the player to realize that. Celeste's approach to faith is one of personal spirituality discovered by entering into nature. It brings to life what Emerson says of nature in a supernatural and literal way. As you can tell, it's more concerned with how Madeline gains faith in herself by understanding her own spirit than it is religion. This is where Iconoclasts steps in. Just by looking at the title of the game, Iconoclasts, it should be immediately clear how this game relates to religion, since an iconoclast is someone who attacks beliefs or religious institutions. But to say this implies that Iconoclasts is some kind of anti-religion game, and that's simply untrue. Unlike Celeste, the player's journey is not one of discovering faith and spirituality, but rather examining the nature of it through other people. The two religions of Iconoclasts, the Christian-like One Concern and the fertility-worshipping Isi, provide two different approaches to religion to be compared through the characters of Royal, a holy prophet of the One Concern, and Mina, a pirate outlaw of the Isi. Both of these characters are clear contradictions of their respective belief systems. Royal is supposed to be a holy progeny, but nobody treats him that way, and Mina is supposed to have a deep connection to family, but struggles to maintain any relationship. This results in both characters having heated debates with other members of their religions about how they misrepresent those core values. It also results in, by the end, each character facing spiritual crisis as they realize their contradiction. In having the player, as Robin, watch the contradiction of these so-called religious people, the player comes to an understanding of the negative reality of religion. They become acutely aware that in all religions there are tons of people who fail to practice even the most dogmatic of tenets, sometimes even using the power that religion gives them to manipulate people, like most of the high-ranking officials of the One Concern do. This is not to say that Mina and Royal are bad people. They both live in a system that has molded their most basic thoughts in a particular direction. This is true of Royal especially, as an important part of his character is that he is so disconnected from reality by his upbringing that he thinks he can successfully save the world world by reasoning with his god, only referred to as him. But in this negative reality of religion, there are also positives. Iconoclasts provides the player with an understanding of why these religions exist in the first place, specifically through Mina's explanation of the Holy Temple, where the ancestors emerged, and primarily City 1 for the one concerned, the Holy City which seems free of all pain and unhappiness. Iconoclasts explores this idea of religion on such a grand scale, opposite completely to Celeste. However, if we remember that Unamuno writes about faith being a personal discovery, we see the most spiritual progression and the positives of faith in Elro, Robin's brother. Before the game even begins, Elro is deeply entrenched in the system of the one concerned, working at their headquarters as a chemist. I'm going to get into some spoilers here, so skip to the time on screen if you don't want to hear it. Okay, so Elro begins to have his religiosity come into question when that very religion kills his wife and daughter as an act of penance. Notice how the one concerned even adopts Christian terms. After this point, Elro becomes more and more focused on the essence of religion, even saying at one point, backstories of this stuff isn't the problem, it's the people. This is itself a contradiction in Elro because with the closest values destroyed by the end of the game, literally all he wants is Robin to be with him. All he cares about is people, or a person. There's this magical moment where Elro urges Robin to stay with him and just let the world end. And the player can totally do that, or beat the game. And yes, I know Elro is referring to the high-ranking officials of the one concern, but it's still interesting how at the end he still only cares about people. I guess that's kind of the point of Iconoclasts in the end. It's a game that really boils spirituality and faith down to its core. Iconoclasts serves as a reminder of what Celeste aims to say. Celeste takes the player on a pilgrimage through which its protagonist comes to a realization of their personal spirit. Iconoclasts reminds the player that religion is really about that spiritual fulfillment on a person-to-person level. It creates so much large-scale drama with corrupt institutions, reformations, and literal god-killing, but excels in the minute, in the strength of its people. By playing Iconoclasts through the lens of such a blank canvas of a character like Robin, the player is constantly coming to understandings of the people in the world. They realize that while the religions may be out of whack, the people are just trying to survive and believe in something that gives them happiness. The problem is the institutions. All of this is backdropped on an apocalyptic event because the one concern's greed has used up all the ivory. And I don't mean like elephant ivory, I mean like, it's like this white oil substance that holds everything together. Anyway, you know what I mean. When Emerson describes in his essay, Nature, the meaning of faith, he comes to the realization that all good deeds are in line with nature and all bad deeds go against it. In essence, nature provides a nearly perfect vision of morality. This is contrasted by the actions of both the one concern and the EC, as each of their actions goes against the planet's law. They use too much ivory, and so the planet begins to fall apart, and so they are judged negatively by the game, especially the one concerned. Celeste and Iconoclasts, above all, are about individual spirituality. It's about having that spirituality influenced by and in tune with nature. It's about the soul. It's about spirituality and it's about the soul.